Welcome to Bark and Borrow. I'm Jacqueline Pate, and I'm joined by my partner in pet care lending, Claire Cronin. We're the pet care experts at Live Oak Bank, and we're here to help you navigate the business side of the pet industry. Whether you're looking to purchase your first location, scale your boarding capacity, or get the capital to acquire an existing facility, we've got you covered. We know that running a pet resort isn't all puppy cuddles. It's P&Ls, payroll, and a whole lot of grit. So we're peeling back the layers of the financing process to help you grow. If you're ready to start building your empire, you're in the right place. We're beyond excited to have Claire Pickens, founder of Claire-ity Group, joining us today. Claire brings nearly 30 years of experience in the veterinary and pet care industry. She started her career as an entrepreneur, building and successfully selling her own veterinary practice. She then moved into a national leadership role where she helped open and operate more than 100 veterinary locations and supported practices through growth and transition. Today, through Claire-ity Group, she works closely with pet care entrepreneurs to develop clear, lender-ready business plans that are both realistic and built for execution, helping them bring their vision to life while staying in the driver's seat.
Before we jumpstart into the nuts and bolts of this, let's rewind a bit. You've become a go-to resource for the pet care industry, building strong business plans and funding. What are you focused on today with the Claire-ity Group?
I'm focused on helping people really get started with a clear frame of reference, a clear mind. I've been in their shoes. I've walked a mile in their shoes. And I think the biggest thing that can come out of the relationship with me is that they've thought about things they might not have otherwise ordinarily thought about that will help prepare them for the tougher moments when they're actually in business.
Can you tell us how you got into the pet care and veterinary space? Because I feel that's a very unique story of yours.
Well, I grew up on a country road in the wine country in Sonoma, California. And there was a horse farm not that far away from me, close enough that I either rode my bike or rode my horse. And I started by helping large animal veterinarians when I was 12 or 13 years old with the brood mare and foaling process. So I helped with artificial insemination. I brushed out all the manes and tails of all the brood mares, and then I was there for a lot of live foal births along the way. Even though I went to college for engineering initially, I ended up working at a small animal veterinarian. I ended up volunteering at the vet school, and I just never really could get away from the industry. It just kept drawing me back in.
What type of clients are you currently working with?
Working with vet services and pet services. So anything from boarding, grooming, pet resorts, pet trainers, small animal veterinarians, and anything from boutique to expansions where they're taking it from a boutique operation and moving into a larger space.
Awesome, Claire. That's a great overview. Now let's get into something that we see all the time. The difference between the dream of owning a pet care facility and then actually running one day to day. What's the biggest misconception people have when starting a daycare and boarding facility?
Well, I think even just taking one more big step back. I think the misconception that people have if they've never owned a business is that they're automatically going to do it better than whoever else they worked for. And it takes a lot of work to own a business. And as an entrepreneur and an owner, you have to develop your own personality in that. So I think that's the first misconception is, I'll do it better than whatever employer I worked for. If they're expanding, very often they're not used to being that far away from their business. So maybe there's different layers, there's more employees, there's different things that will impact their personality on the business. So a lot of people assume expansion will feel like the original boutique, but it might not. And there's bigger things to consider when they're doing that, especially if they're going multi-site. It's a big impact on the personality of the business.
Yeah, absolutely. Pivoting back to first-time owners, what are you seeing that these first-time owners are kind of underestimating the most about the process, getting a business started, et cetera?
Yeah, I think there's a tendency to oversimplify at the beginning and say things like, I'll figure that out when I'm a little bit closer, or I'll figure that out when I've got to tackle that. And I think I did a fair amount of that myself, so I can say that's not really the best order to go in.
Sure.
So I think it's an underestimation of, like, take a look at these SOPs that might apply to this type of business, or take a look at the different levels of employees you might have as you grow, and let's have that conversation, because you're probably not thinking about all of those things and what it costs. So there's a cost related to almost every one of those things. So that's typically not recognized from the start.
Sure.
So Claire, a big question, I want to ask you is what is the differences from business that succeeds and the ones that struggle that you're seeing in that early process as well?
Yeah, this is a little bit more of a pride before process question. And I think you can either set yourself up for a bit of a smooth launch, or you can also, if you delay things, you can set yourself up for struggle. You just have to really get out of your own way to do that. So a lot of these things that sometimes through the planning process feel like minutia to people, and they're like, I'll think about that later. It's so much better to scenario play and think about those things early on, because you're going to have, it's Murphy's Law, you're going to have something that comes up in your first 90 days that you're going to inevitably say as an entrepreneur, gosh, I wish I would have thought about that a little bit before now, or role-played it, or thought about how I would handle that and talked about it with my team during their pre-training. And a lot of those things are the unexpected, like maybe it's a medical issue with a boarding dog. Yeah. Maybe it's an employee issue where you didn't know the HR laws. And those are pretty typical common things to have happen. Maybe it's a customer review that you thought they were good and they give you a 2-star and you're like, what do I do with that? So it's really just kind of getting out of the pride mindset and getting into more of a planning and let me really find out what I don't know before I open.
So Claire, how often do you see people overlook if the business actually fits into their life?
Pretty much all the time.
Yeah.
I would say that that's the norm. And then as we talk through things, people figure out how they're going to make it work. So that comes in a few different categories. One is relationally. It's pretty common for people to go into business with a spouse, a partner, a family member, son, daughter. That needs to fit the relationship. So that's a big part of life. The other thing is operational hours. So there's a revenue aspect of being open 24/7. And then there's you're the on-call manager 24/7. And so I would say it's more the norm at the beginning of the business process for people to think about those things fairly idealistically and then come to terms with what that really, really means for the business and what's going to happen when a stress point comes in. Someone gets sick, you can't be on call, you want to take a vacation, have a child, those kind of fun things.
Real life things, yes.
Real life things, right? So yeah, it's definitely more the norm than the abnorm.
So Claire, what does business life really mean for this industry?
It means your life can still function. It means you can be the parent that you want to be, the partner that you want to be. There's a financial fit for your life that you're in it for the long haul, that you understand that you might not sell it immediately, or maybe you want to pass this business on. But business life fit means looking at the near term and the far term to really understand that there are consequences to big commitments, just like marriage, just like having children, just like owning a business. And business life fit means that you're thinking through, what does that actually mean for my life? Will this impact how many date nights I get to have with my partner? Does this mean I can't go to sporting functions, or it means I can? And what I encourage during the business process is let's find out how you can do the things that still make your life work. Because the business is great. The business feeds your family, and hopefully it's an investment you can turn around. But also, you should not stop living.
Correct.
During that process. So that's what business life fit means, is don't stop living once you open a business.
I love that this is something that you talk with clients about, because by the time we talk to clients, I feel like people are mostly just so excited about building this grand business, which is wonderful, but they need to think about the good, the bad, and the ugly, right? What is this going to look like for their life? What is it going to look like long term? So I love that that's an aspect that you hone in on at the beginning stages while you're kind of building your dream, the kind of focus of making sure that that becomes a reality as well.
Do you also think that when you bring up these questions, does many people, do you see them stall and think, or have they thought about it, or what is the normal reaction, or what kind of balance is there in that?
That's a great question, because the term is overused in general.
Yeah.
And so if somebody's coming from a corporate job and they hear work-life balance, they're thinking about how many PTO days they get assigned.
Correct.
The difference in business ownership is there are no PTO days. There are no benefits other than the ones you create for yourself. So it's a reversal of thinking all together, where you create your own benefit package and then you build that into your business. And I'll give you an example. In my own boarding facility, I made a decision early on that I needed to work every role in the practice, except for doctor, that'd be illegal. But every role in the building as intimately as I could before I assigned it to anybody else. Well, I didn't in the first year. I actually didn't give the keys to anybody else to do after-hours walks. So I closed certain times to take vacations. And some people might say, that's nuts, that's crazy, you missed revenue. I actually don't think that's nuts. I think that if you want to run your business a certain way, and if you want to make it fit your life a certain way, just plan for that. Build your own benefits package and go from there, versus being an employee that's expecting that to come to you somehow. So I think that's probably how I see things work, is redefining what that means for people.
So we hear from business owners throughout all stages, but if someone is interested in opening a facility in the next 12 to 18 months, what do you think they should be doing now? Where should their focus be to get that process started?
Well, they should start planning as early as they can. There's a lot of aspects to a business, just cultural foundation, core values, and things like that that are really important to formulate prior to formulating the financial projections. The financial projections are arguably the easiest part of the planning process, and that's why they shouldn't be done first. So they should start planning what their business is and who their business is as soon as possible. They should also speak to a lawyer as soon as possible, especially in any family or friendship or any element of partnership. They should speak to a lawyer about an operating agreement and what that actually means, and planning for the unforeseen events that can happen in life. And you can never really, you really can't speak to a real estate broker soon enough also, because I think that they know the landscape of change, and they can describe some of those things to you before you're surprised that it takes too long to find a piece of property. So I think those three things, like who you are, legalities of what you'll be, and what does your local area look like for finding space look like, are pretty foundational 12 to 18 months out.
Yeah.
So how do you look at, speaking of location, how do you look at evaluating that for people? Because in our set, like, people are looking for an exact location. They've already picked it out. They've fell in love with it. It may or may not have that special use, but like coming to you from the very beginning, I think they should value what you have the input you have there, and how does that all kind of come together with the whole process?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a belief. There's a belief that you can get a special exception if you just push hard enough on it. That is actually not the case in a lot of geographies across the country.
We have learned.
There are there's some counties and states where their city commissions are pretty flexible, and they have a history of being flexible, so your real estate broker would know that. There's other ones where that's like monumentally a huge move. Yes. So that's one aspect, is don't fall in love with a property before you know it legally fits the right parameters. Otherwise, I've seen people actually invest money in that property prior to knowing that it's a good fit. So that's not a good idea.
So again, we very much align on what we're looking for on our end as well as you. So that kind of also helps build that relationship.
Yes. If you're going to live on the property, I think that, the considerations of what happens if you want to sell the business, can you subdivide the property, is pretty important. And then also, like, the other thing I see happen is sometimes there's a belief that they'd be willing to commute farther for the business that they own than they would have for employment. And so, sure, at the beginning that's going to feel fine, but what's that going to feel like 3 years in, 5 years in? Does that match with picking kids up from daycare? Does that match all those things? And so there are sometimes it makes sense to relocate for the property you find for your business. There's other times where you just need to give yourself more runway and get a broker that's going to help you find it in a reasonable distance from your living situation.
Great advice.
Two things that kind of stuck out to me. One, when you were talking about the things to prepare for, getting ready. And you said that projections should be the easy part. And I don't know about you, Claire, but when I talk to customers, especially those startups, our credit decisions are made very heavily on the projections. And so that's when we get the most hesitation, potential fear from customers are like preparing this magical pro forma that's like going to get you qualified for a loan, right? But I think the way that you described it and kind of taking the thought process a little bit differently, and instead of trying to build projections around getting approved for a loan, really trying to focus on building the actual business, on how you want it to operate, what you want it to operate, what services you're going to provide, kind of really focusing on the business, and then in retrospect, what that looks like from a projection standpoint. To your point, once you kind of have the foundations of building the business you want to build, then in return, it comes out with these projections. So I really like that mindset. Like I said, we have a lot of customers that focus so heavily on just, we need the projections to get approved for a loan, but really having that focus on, let's think about the business that you want to build, and will that then in return actually generate the numbers that you need it to generate, right?
Yes, and that even comes down to let's just pretend you're looking at a 5,000 square foot space and you start pontificating on floor plans. The reason the projection should be done last is that it matters where your front desk is. It matters where you take the dogs to get walked. It matters how long and how many people it's going to take to care for the animals. And that all impacts your staffing ratios. So I could build projections without any of that information and make it look perfect. But in reality, we see a lot of businesses that if those items are not worked out and that planning is not done, then you end up at a staffing expense that is exorbitant when the business actually opens.
Right.
And then what does that do to the unicorn projections? It just destroys them right out of the gate. So I actually... Sometimes I get a little pushback on this, but I actually don't even touch those or share those with the client until after I've addressed the market analysis, some of their pricing aspects, what they want, how many people they want to service the business. And then once we get to operations and we're just talking about logistics and SOPs, that's the safe point to start sharing projections. And then I show them what they said looks like on paper. And then we talk about pricing, because that's the last component to projections is how much should it cost your client.
I love that.
Right.
One other thing that you kind of honed in on that I appreciate and I agree with, you mentioned an attorney. You mentioned a real estate broker. You mentioned a CPA. We really hone in on resources. When you are planning that business, being able to communicate, kind of build your team around other industry experts that know these fields, how have you seen that play either to a customer's benefit or to a customer's detriment by either building a great team around you or the lack of a team?
Well, they say life teaches you most of the lessons you need to learn. I was married during my business ownership, and I was one of those clients that thought nothing could happen and nothing could go wrong. Unfortunately, 6 years in, things did go wrong. Forming an operating agreement for a business partnership, because that's what it is. It's a marriage, but it's also a business partnership. Amidst strife is much, much harder. And that's where I see people hit the wall, is that they either don't agree. It's better to not agree on the business plan and say this is how big of a business that we want, and to have those moments of strife prior to opening the business than opening a business too big or too small and having it afterwards, and then not knowing what to do when one partner doesn't really want to be involved in it.
Right.
So part of this is observed behavior. Part of it is my own lived experience of knowing that you really should tackle the most difficult topics as calmly as possible with planning, whenever you get a chance to do that. So, like death, divorce, all the things, injury, disability. You can talk about all those things before the business opens, and so we shouldn't avoid them.
So Claire, kind of wrapping this topic up, what role does realistic financial planning play?
Well, all too often, projections are like you guys said, projections are used for the sake of getting financing, but they're not used for anything else. So that's the reason it's great to work with a planner, then also work with a CPA, because really what should happen is that those projections that you did should become a measure of operational execution. And they should be in a place where you can go back and you can say, oh yeah, that's what I said I wanted to do here, and to hold yourself to some of your own words. Mm-hmm. And then also find out where you might have been a little bit wrong about your own words and make adjustments. So I typically say, especially in the first 6 months, kind of check in every 30, 45 days on what you said you were going to do and then what you actually did. And then after that, once you get to 6 months and a year, the business starts to mature. You get close to a year, you should be reshaping your projections and reshaping your plan, because it's conceptual to that point. Absolutely. And then there's a reality that takes over. And then reality should form its next path forward. And that plan will make itself obsolete at some point in that maturity phase.
Absolutely. And I think that you hit on a good point there, that first year really is getting open and operating and trying to explain that to customers as they come in, to say, year one, we know that, we're not going to get to that break even. We should get close to it, but we're not going to get to it. And year two, we'll see that, we're hedging closer, but year three, we're really off to the races and things are kind of coming into play, and you're getting, your 5-year plan is then getting really close to what you expected. So it's nice to hear the reality of it all as well, because I feel a lot of people just think they're going to go in there, they're going to make the money, and life is going to just be, unicorns and sunshine.
Well, and I will tell you, having been a part of opening locations across the country in lots of different scenarios with lots of different people, it took a long time to refine the projections to the point that we could nail it down to when that break-even point would happen. And it took a lot of very specific nuances about, is it between 4 months, 8 months, 12 months, 16 months? It had a lot to do with the geography, population growth. Those are all things that typically small business owners either don't look into that level of data, or they're just not analyzing it in the same way. So it just moves at a different pace in a singular business, because it's personality driven, like it's passion driven. It's a little different than being almost purely data driven, right? Yes. So it's a very different thing. But those projections can be your own data, and you can keep notes and say, this is this is what I want, or, oh, I forgot I wanted this in month 6 and I forgot to write it down.
Yeah. And it's nice that we're all on the same page on this, because I feel that, again, as Jacqueline and I say a lot, like, we're here as a resource for people. Like, we're not always the bank, but just knowing that they have that team, and I know we've hit on it as well, but I think that's really important. And what really stood out whenever we met you was we were aligned in a lot of our functions and a lot of what we do in a day-to-day, and caring about people opening their doors for the right opportunity and not just checking a box and saying, we're open.
Okay, Claire, before we go, we have one last thing for you. At the end of every episode, we like to do a segment that we call the Bark Blitz. So it's quick, it's fun, it's rapid fire questions. So the first thing that comes to your mind, are you ready?
Ready.
Biggest mistake you see?
Rushing.
One must have in a business plan.
Your personality. Don't let AI write your plan.
What is the most overrated expense?
Overuse of technology, forgetting the human touch.
Most underrated success factor.
Being able to understand how humans move through a business.
Best advice you've ever given a client?
To trust their gut a little bit more, because they were second guessing really logical things, and they were right.
What is your favorite dog breed?
Golden Retriever.
Oh, I love that.
What is your favorite dog name?
Happens to be that breed, Bradley. He's my dog.
Okay, now just a fun one. What is your favorite ice cream flavor?
Chocolate on chocolate on chocolate on chocolate fudge.
Love it. Awesome. That was fun. Thank you so much for being a good sport. We've so highly enjoyed having you today. Before we go, can you tell everyone where they can find you and how to find more information about you?
Well, the best way to find me is at my website, smallbusiness-dreams.com, and my email is on there, and you probably want to click on it versus me spelling it, Claire@claritygroup.com. You're welcome to reach out to me there, or find me on LinkedIn and reach out to me there, and I love to hear about people's business dreams and help them move it forward.
Thanks for joining us today. Stay tuned for more episodes of Bark and Borrow, where you'll hear from more industry experts like Claire.